What a party. What a Boston Tea Party. The year, of course, is 1773, and we are on the verge of kicking out the King of England and having our own America. But before we can talk about this exciting time, we got to talk about what led up to it. We got to talk in a whole about the American Revolution. The American Revolution doesn't start with a battle like Lexington and Concord. It actually starts with a whole other war, the French and Indian War. And so my fellow colonist future Americans, please take out your review guide for the American Revolution and let's get rocking and rolling. What you see up here is the number that we are on. Sometimes it will stay that way, so be sure you're looking at it and let's get going. The French and Indian War, of course, starts with the rivalry between the French and the British. Going back generations, they did not like each other. They fought wars over land. They fought wars over monarchy. And now they're fighting a war in the New World. You see, here's our maps. Right here, I got green. This is 1754. Green means Spain. This purple color means Great Britain. And anything kind of this orange is French. As you'll see, there was some disputed territory, especially in the Ohio River Valley. Well, this led to war, and British victory forced the French out of Canada and west of the Appalachian Mountains. If you want to see this, look at the next map. This is 1763. You see, I might not be very bright, but here in North America, it seems that I don't see any orange. There's purple and green, but the French are gone. Question number 3. So now life is good if you are a British colonist because you got rid of the hated French and now you can go explore all that land. But, the proclamation of 1763, the proclamation of 1763 said no settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains. This enraged British settlers because they thought, wait, we just won a war, the French and Indian War, to get all that land. How come we shouldn't be able to go over there and access it? Well, you see, there's a bunch of people that live over here. You may have forgotten about them, but they're called the Native Americans. And if you colonists, me, jump over here to take over that land, it's going to lead to war. And who's going to bail out the colonists? Well, the British Crown will. So the reason for the proclamation of 1763 was that all this land would be costly for the British to protect. So you stay over there. So says Great Britain. And colonists do not like that, but they don't rebel. Number 4. The next thing, in order to pay for war, pay for that costly French and Indian War, the British passed the Stamp Act. Now, the Stamp Act was a small tax in the form of a stamp that you had to put on almost any document. Your most prized documents, like legal documents, documents of marriage, review documents, would have to have a stamp affixed to it. The colonists did not like this, and they protested. At one protest, the Boston Massacre, British troops fire on anti-British demonstrators. Now, it was more chaotic than you see in this picture. This picture is propaganda showing those British troops firing down on the hapless colonists. But the bottom line is that there was colonial blood on the streets of Boston, all over fighting about these taxes. And now the American Revolution is beginning. In 1773, the Boston Tea Party occurs. This is when colonists jumped onto British ships and dumped British tea into Boston Harbor because of the Tea Act of 1773, which said that the colonists had to drink the British foul brew. So as a result, they had themselves a little fiesta and dumped tea into Boston Harbor. As you can see, the British people, or the colonists, are getting more aggressive, and the British Crown must be getting more enraged by all this protest. Question number 7, and now, for the first time, the colonists begin working together. The first Continental Congress was the first time that most colonies acted together. They sent representatives and said, let's come up with a game plan for all these protests. Now, you notice that I said most and not all. That's because all colonies except Georgia sent a representative. Far down south, Georgia doesn't send a representative. Remember, the Southerners had those strong cultural ties to Great Britain, so I guess it makes sense that they wouldn't want to start this thing. But the first time, it is the first Continental Congress. Now, War begins. The fighting starts in Massachusetts. At Lexington and Concord, the Minutemen skirmish against British troops. The first shot fired, called the shot heard round the world, goes off. And now war can begin. While this war is going to be going on, there's going to be a separate intellectual revolution that will be happening as well. Now, once we have war, how do the British people feel about this? Well, the war did not have popular support in Great Britain because, think about it, these Americans, not Americans yet, but soon to be, they're British people as well. These could be family members, it could be friends. So in London, in Great Britain, the British people weren't so excited about going to a war in America. That's important because that might lead to the end of the war at the very end. All right. Next subject, colonial differences. Question number 10. You see, there are people that think about this whole thing pretty differently. Well, one group are the Patriots. The Patriots favored complete independence from Great Britain. Get rid of the crown. We don't want them. Get them out of here. They were inspired by the words of John Locke and Thomas Paine, who advocated for rights of people and for getting rid of King George III, including, we're still on question number 10, Virginian Patrick Henry, who gave his impassioned line, "Give me liberty or give me death," meaning get rid of your taxes. You're not representing us in your parliament, so don't tax me, don't take away my rights. I'd rather die than be a slave to your tyranny. Of course, there were people who did not want to get rid of the crown. Loyalists wanted to remain loyal to the British crown. They said, hey, taxation is justified to pay for the British troops to protect us from Indian attacks. It costs money. Remember the proclamation line of 1763? That is cash that Great Britain is paying, so we should pay some taxes. Also, southern colonies are where there would be more loyalists. It was more likely for loyalists to be in the southern colonies because remember, those are where those close cultural and economic ties to Great Britain were. All right, so we got patriots. They want to get rid of the king. They like John Locke. They like Thomas Paine. We got loyalists. They say, hey, it's okay because they have to pay for our protection, and mostly in the South with close cultural and economic ties. But what about those who just didn't want to get involved at all? Well, those are called neutrals. Neutrals were colonists who wanted to stay uninvolved. There's a theory that most Americans actually were neutrals. Just stay out, stay out, stay out. All right, ideas. Let's talk about the mind. Let's talk about John Locke and Thomas Paine. Let's start in Europe with the Enlightenment, a European movement in the 17th and 18th century, which meant a whole number of things, both scientifically, both with governments and with religions, but in this case with governments. It was new ideas about the relationship between rulers and the ruled. So the Enlightenment gets new government ideas. And John Locke is going to be the big guy. John Locke believed that people have natural rights. These rights were life, liberty, and property. And how do you get these natural rights? Well, you're born with them. I was born with them. You were born with them. As soon as you came out, you had life, liberty, and property. Now, people enter into a social contract, not a real written contract, an idea contract with government. And here's the deal. We, the people, will follow all the rules because we understand, you got to follow the rules for a society to work. But you, government, you have to promise to protect our rights, protect our natural rights, which we are born with. Remember, oh government, that power comes from the consent of the governed. This is a radical idea. Before this, it was believed the king has complete power. The people to have power, that's what Locke says, consent of the governed. Because the people have the power, if you, the government, if you don't protect our rights, then it is our right to overthrow you, the government. This guy's Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine writes a pamphlet called Common Sense. Common Sense challenged the rule of the king. It contributed to a growing sentiment for independence. The colonists read Thomas Paine's Common Sense, and in it, it lists all sorts of complaints, things the king had done to enrage the colonists, like the Proclamation Line of 1763, like the Boston Massacre, like the Stamp Act. And as people read this pamphlet, they said, all right, maybe it's time to be independent. Independent, you say? The Declaration of Independence. That is the document to officially say goodbye, sayonara, see you later, oh great king. See, this is Thomas Jefferson's face. It needs a new paint job, but TJ, he looked to John Locke and he looked to Thomas Paine when he came up with his ideas for the Declaration of Independence. The DOI, the Declaration of Independence, was written by Thomas Jefferson, and he borrowed the ideas, the natural rights ideas of John Locke, and the Thomas Paine's common sense ideas as well. All right, so let's look at this document. A couple key quotes. We hold these truths to be self-evident, meaning you just know them, everyone knows them, that all men are created equal. Now, in this case, Jefferson's really talking about all men like him. But later, this will be used to include all men and women and will be a very powerful American quote and idea. That all men are given unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, that sounds a lot like John Locke, and that's because he took John Locke's ideas and made minor tweaks. Remember, he's borrowing the ideas of Locke, and he's borrowing the ideas of Paine, okay? Now, the key DOI principles, question number 22, saw an increase in political, social, and economic participation. What that means is that many years later, many years after July 4th, 1776, Americans will look at this document and say, hey, shouldn't this include my political rights, my social rights, my economic rights? It will be used to guarantee more rights for more people later, okay? All right, let's talk war. Back to this war. We left things off at Lexington and Concord. A lot of stuff has happened, but now it's time to win. A big reason for the American victory is going to be this guy, George Washington. George Washington avoided any... Oh, I'm sorry. I, George Washington, avoid any situation that I viewed as destructive to my army. I knew I had to keep my army together to keep the revolution alive. Now, one great reason I was able to pull this off is because of my excellent leadership skills. You see, I know how to lead men, and men knew how to follow me. And because of my leadership, the army stayed together, and the revolution was won. Now, it wasn't just George Washington who did everything. You see, Ben Franklin actually went to France, and he negotiates the Treaty of Alliance with France, which makes sense because, France and Great Britain, they don't really like each other. So Ben Franklin says, hey, help us fight your enemy. Our enemy right now is Great Britain. That's yours too. So let's link up and let's join the same side. Well,
Vive France. Vive la liberté.
At the Battle of Yorktown, the French Army and Navy helped American win victory at the Battle of Yorktown. The Battle of Yorktown ended the war. The war is over. America, the dream has been realized. Now, I know what you're thinking. How am I possibly going to remember that the Battle of Yorktown was like the last big battle, the last one that ended the war? Well, don't you worry, because if you think about it, look at the alphabet. Y is towards the end of the alphabet. In Battle of Yorktown, Yorktown starts with a Y towards the end. So it makes sense that the last battle was Yorktown with a Y.